Good morning. Thank you very much. It's always good to be back again in Ireland. It's a country that I have a great fondness for, that I've developed over the last 10 years. But I'm here today to share with you this idea that we live in such exciting times. And that excitement that I'm referring to is not related to Brexit. The excitement is about the tremendous changes that are going on in the world. Industries are being transformed around us. In the almost 6 decades that I've been involved in the agri-food industry, either as part of a farm family and a farm family business, as from an industry leadership standpoint, and from a researching standpoint, the level of activity today that's taking place at all levels of the agricultural system, from farm to consumers, has never been greater. So my objective in the next 25 minutes or so is to provide you with a very high-level, very fast global overview of the macro context, which I think today is well understood, and also what I think are the 4 most important trends that are impacting the sector. And this will give you this background, this beyond Ireland look as you think about and discuss and debate this next 10-year strategy. Before I really dive into that, though, I do want to say congratulations on having a strategy. I think that's unusual. And what's even more unique is the involvement of the private sector with the public sector in setting those strategy objectives and leading to something that's very commercially oriented and based on, led by a vision that then gets communicated broadly. So congratulations for that. The macro setting context is very well understood at this point, this narrative. Basically, we have to increase, the food demand is going to increase significantly over the next 30 years, and that demand has to be satisfied in a world with constraints, particularly on the water side and new environmental policies. All of this happens at a time when we have lower stocks in the world, we have supply coming on in bumpy ways, and the unusual weather events that we're experiencing is leading to an era of increased price volatility. To me, the biggest driver, the biggest influencer over the global food system over the last 10 years and continuing to be the next 10 years in the future is China. As the government there really pushes to make sure that the population, 22% of the world's population, is fed with less than 10% of the world's resources in terms of arable land and even less water. Food policy there is critical. The decision on Chinese government in terms of what to produce and what to import drives the structure of our industry around the world. And today, their production is being challenged even more by the epidemic of African swine fever, which, even though accurate numbers are very hard to come by, any place between 100 million and 300 million pigs in China have been lost. That's a half of their breeding population. It's having an impact of transforming the footprint of the global protein industry in order to satisfy this new demand. The other transformation that might be taking place because of that is in the government's recommendation on diet. So one response could be, let's rebuild the pork industry. A second response could be, let's bring pork in from outside. A third response could be, let's encourage our consumers to eat other proteins rather than pork, which has a lasting impact here and also is a benefit from the sustainability perspective. Behind China, so thinking about the next 10 years of your strategy, China is still a very, very important driver of that to keep in mind. Looking beyond those 10 years, Africa certainly is on the horizon. So thinking about how to be positioned for those markets, how to participate, is a critical piece. So in the backdrop of this very macro view of the world, of increasing demand and constrained supply, there's 4 important trends going on. The first one that I think you're all very aware of here is that this new consumer, which today is having more impact, controlling more about how food is produced on the farm than ever before, by asking more questions, wanting more information, putting more demands on the products that they want to buy and then to eat. A particular oversized influence in this market is the millennial consumer, this generation that is now starting to have families, to feed their children, to pass on their values, and really leading a revolution by not only influencing themselves, but also, perhaps the parents, like myself, of a millennial, that I'm now more thoughtful about it. The emphasis in this marketplace is on fresh, it's on local, it's on authentic, it's on health. And the industry has responded by introducing numerous products that are now tied, that used to be commodities, that are now tied back to what that production system is to get it there. It used to be, in the States just recently, it was all about cage-free eggs. Now cage-free eggs have become the commodity. It's all about free range, and now it's not just free range, it's the freest of the free range, with, in this case, pasture-raised on over 8 acres. So specific about that system. You can go to restaurants now, and on the menu, beefsteaks are not just by cut. They're by origin, breed, grass-fed, corn-fed at 180 days, corn-fed at 270 days. Again, this tremendous fragmentation in the marketplace in order to satisfy these demands. Why? Because the growth in the market is on the premium side. So that's where the profit pools are. That's where the new products are being introduced. But the impact of this push to premium is that what yesterday was premium has now become the new commodity. That's the new standard. And because of that, is driving shifts in consumption on the value side as well. As cage-free in the U.S. is no longer the option, it's no longer the value add, it's where all of the industry will transform to push that there. Kind of following on this trend of the changing consumer is the area of sustainability, the trend of sustainability. When I was first presented 9 years ago at Farmley, the initial Pathways to Growth plan, environmental concerns were just starting to really bubble up on top of the noise of the global recession. And I think that, again, Ireland, you very astutely saw this and positioned on it. But today, it's become fundamental to the industry. It's something that customers expect. Customers require, employees really engage with it. But I think what we were starting to see, it's fundamental to the industry license to operate. That's a bigger risk today than ever before, particularly in countries like Ireland, say the California dairy industry, New Zealand, places to where there are choices to be made about how to use resources. The challenge with sustainability, as we've seen over these 10 years or 15 years, is what actually does it mean? The definition keeps expanding, the boundaries keep expanding. It started to be kind of inside the factory gate footprint, started adding new dimensions to it that were not necessarily environmental, animal welfare, labor practices, human health as part of sustainability, packaging, food waste. But the one thing that we do know about food is that you cannot build in sustainability into a product once it gets past the farm gate. It has to happen on the inside. And this recognition is driving stronger and tighter relationships along the food chain as, for instance, a sustainability audit is used to communicate consumer demand down to the farm level. Innovative programs are being introduced in order to encourage greater conservation, greater sustainability within the farm gate. Things like regenerative agriculture, carbon initiatives, biodiversity initiatives. And there's also alliances that span companies within a sector that previously would have been strong competitors. For instance, if you're in the beef industry and you have a strong position on sustainability, perhaps stronger than your competitors, but the industry itself, the sector itself, is viewed as a tough environmental culprit, it doesn't help for you to be better. It's the whole industry, the whole sector has to be better. So we have new relationships across and within industries being driven by this. But again, it keeps evolving. Where do we think about sustainability? Is it about sustainable farming? Is it about sustainable agriculture? Is it about sustainable food? Is it a sustainable food system? Or is it a sustainable diet? And as we see now, the conversation is starting to really shift on this level. I thought a few years ago that we would see a lot of competition, increasing competition between different value chains. You know, poultry over beef, fish over poultry, based on footprint. But what we're seeing now is this recommendation coming to just avoid it, to stay out of those sectors altogether. It's not trading it off. It's actually to eliminate in order to reduce that footprint. Overarching this entire piece and enabling this entire piece are the transformational technologies that are arising. Certainly, we've seen what's happened in the movie industry with Netflix, hotels with Airbnb, the taxi industry with Uber and Lyft. Ag has been a bit slow, but really has the same potential here to see this transformation. It's happening at all levels of the value chain. We have technologies like gene editing that allows us to produce animals that are either healthier, more productive, less, have less ability to get sick, to be impacted by something, crops that are able to carry special attributes, grow in special conditions. Across machine learning to help us get better at predicting demand across the value chain and reducing food waste. Particularly active area is in this area of on the farm use, the measurements, the sensors, the analytics that go on behind precision farming. And there, the idea about this digitalization of agriculture, it's about increasing productivity at the farm level. It is about reducing the resources to produce what we are already. It's about being able to make proactive decisions rather than having to wait to find out a field has a piece of disease in it, a cow has a health issue. If we can spot that in advance, you can keep that potential up and be closer about being able to access the genetic potential of that crop or animal. And basically, with this data, with these modeling techniques, this analytical capability, transforming agriculture from an art into a science. Another piece that technology, we see a lot of work today from a broad sector of partners is around blockchain. I'm not going to spend time on it. I'm not an expert at this, but basically the idea is now if consumers are concerned about traceability, about transparency, information is now able to flow up the chain, assuming that it's entered correctly at the very first instance, then it can't be transformed. But to me, a more exciting area is the opportunity to not just to have information flow up the chain, but to have it flow back down again from the consumer. Driscoll's is the largest berry company in the world. They are leading in the US, leading globally, but in the US they have commanding market shares in raspberries and strawberries and blackberries and blueberries, not a commanding market share, but a very significant player. They have on the bottom of every package that they sell in the marketplace, of the 3 products, not blueberries, which are harvested actually by machine, but the 3 products that are still picked by hand, there is a unique code on the bottom that traces that one container back to the field, to the farm, to the field, to the harvester, to the day. That thing can be related to the conditions. And as a consumer, you're invited for every package of Driscoll's berries you buy to go online and to answer questions about the quality of that particular pack of berries, that one particular pack of berries. And you're rewarded for that. So unlike those airline surveys you get now every time you step on the plane, did you have a good flight? What did you think? Yeah, click here. It's just taking my time. I don't do this anymore. You're actually, if you fill one of these out, you're rewarded with a coupon on your next purchase. So there's an incentive to participate in this system, a positive incentive. And the information that comes back on quality of that package is now of the timeliness and the scale that they're able to, in a real-time basis, go back. If they spot that berries coming from this one area, this one farm, are starting to have quality issues, they can immediately go back to that farmer and bring that field out of production. So this is timeliness. This is actionable information rather than something that says, well, gee, we know that we had a quality problem. Now we have to go back and to just fix that problem, but we can't do anything about what here. So real-time actionable information. Consumers, back to the field immediately. The second thing that you do with this is you build it all into a giant database and you build predictive models. And so now you don't have to wait to find you have a quality problem. You can actually spot when a quality problem is coming up and be able to get that field out of production before it even has to go through the chain and reach the consumer level. To me, this ability to solve the very basic problem, historic problem that we've had in agriculture and food about not being able to get consumer information back to the producer level, this is the most exciting impact of this technology. The fourth piece, the fourth trend that I think is very exciting, but in some ways very challenging, is the tremendous increase in flow of capital, outside capital into the agriculture and food industry. Historically, this has been a low-growth industry. It wasn't interesting to investors, and now today that has changed. A lot of it is because the opportunities that are being assessed for that reward, that financial reward for investment is being perceived as higher than we in the industry perceive it. So the level, if you just think about ag tech on side, this in 2018, $17 billion invested globally in ag tech. Most of that, almost half of that was in the US, 21% in China. India was there as well. About split across the food system. Interesting, so that was 43% higher than the previous year, and 2016 or 2017 was 43% higher than the year before. So increase in capital coming in. And it's not just the amount of capital that's coming in, but who's willing to put this capital into the system now, this investment capital. It's the traditional investors, the venture capitalists, the ones that will take risks, the angel investors, some seed funds, but it's also sovereign wealth funds. Governments that are concerned about food security and see technology solutions as necessary to be able to achieve their own internal objectives. It is very wealthy individuals, people like Bill Gates, Sergey Brin, Jeff Bezos, who are seeing opportunities. They've seen transformation in other sectors. They believe that transformation will happen here as well. And they are coming in with the belief that the systems can be rebuilt and need to be rebuilt. rather than incremental improvement. Two areas in particular that are drawing a lot of activity. One is this area of controlled environment production, indoor farming, vertical farming. That might be in a shipping container. Maybe it's on a rooftop in Canada with a greenhouse. Maybe it's in a vertical farm that's a completely closed system. Maybe it's in a huge, more typical greenhouse installation, but using the latest technology. These installations actually, so what's it about? Why are we doing this? It's to take risk out of the system. It's to be able to produce the same amount using fewer resources. It's by being able to address the labor challenges through automation, and it's about control. Today, this is still very expensive. High working capital costs for production inside, certainly a high fixed cost of the investment there. But again, the money, about $1 billion, has gone into this over the last 8 or 9 years in order to solve these problems. The second area that has been in the press all summer in the US is the area of protein. So if it's understood that protein has a tremendous environmental footprint, the question is how are we going to solve that problem? Is it by breeding a better cow, more climate-friendly cow? Is it through plant-based proteins such as Beyond Meats that have just IPO'd back in May? The IPO went out at $25 a share. Today, it's $125 a share. It was actually higher than that before. And basically valuing the company, and I have to get this number straight because it's really quite staggering, at $1.5 billion. Actually, it's built at that valuation, the $125 a share valuations, it's valued at $9 billion, which is more than the value of Tyson, the largest protein producer in the world. So somebody's seeing opportunity here. Now, will it be realized? I don't know. Or is the future not a plant-based future, but is it actually a meat-based future, but the meat produced without the animal? So cultured meats, which are now more friendly described as cultivated meats, being funded by investors such as Sergey Brin, moving through the production system, still very high cost. Just this week, there is a startup that received funded, an Israeli startup that received funded, and their approach now is to develop a blended product. So it will be a combination of the cultured meat and traditional beef, and in this way they believe they can more quickly enter the market and meet the cost level that's necessary. Is this real? What's the potential? If you look at a report that came out at the end of May, just a few months ago by A.T. Kearney, the consulting firm, they're projecting by 2040 that alternate meat products will be 60% of the protein market. Now that market's grown, but the share of traditional, conventional meat, as you would think about it, has now decreased down to 40%. They see an evolution of products that the plant-based proteins will be an intermediate step because the taste, the cooking characteristics will never be exactly the same as real meat. And then as the quality and the cost of the cultured or the cultivated meat products come down, that will be the tremendous opportunity. Huge change of the global food system as this technology rolls out, if it does roll out. So as I think about these 4 trends in the global environment, these are the takeaways that I have for Ireland. This is what I think should be in your mind as you're discussing and settling on the strategy for the next 10 years and the vision, how to play. The first thing, the absolute first thing that I have to leave you with is that every business must be a technology business. There is no other option, and that includes farms. Technology is impacting every stage of the system. It's going to be data-based. must be encompassed and across the chain. Second point is that supply chains must continue to align. I know some of that's happened here already, but they must continue to align and innovate. Why? They still need to create differentiation to increase sustainability, but more importantly, they have to align because it's about securing that industry license to operate. You can only do that if programs are put in place at the farm level and proof that measurements are collected, the data is collected and made available to show that those programs are effective. The third piece of it is to think about these new investors and how they are going to change the food system. They're coming in, they have higher expectations about the level of change that needs to be made, that can be made, and about the pace that change needs to come about. How must the Irish dairy and the beef industries engage with this? And then finally, this is one that I always end with because I'm very, very committed to this. I believe if you have the best people at the table, the best with the training, best training and development, that is the solution to all these problems and to unlock these opportunities that exist today in what I think is the most exciting time that we've seen in the global food industry. So thank you, and I'm very happy to take questions if there's time.
Thank you very much, Mary. We have 3 floating microphones around the floor, so if anybody does have a question, if you could raise your hand and make yourself known, and before you put the question, if you could identify yourself and what organisation, if any, you're from. Do we have any questions from the floor? I suppose, I don't see, I see a hand up here, yeah.
Hi, Mike McGann, Animal Health Ireland. Mary, you paint a picture of a very, very rapidly changing world. How do you suggest that we frame a strategy that allows for that change, that extraordinary volatility, that keeps the link between the primary producer and the market? You suggest that each new initiative to some extent becomes commoditized, so that implies enormous volatility. So how do you suggest that we now frame a strategy for the next 10 years that allows for that type of volatile society, that ensures that everybody gets a fair return? Because as I see it, the gap between the consumer and the primary producer lengthens rather than shortens, and that implies cost.
Okay. Right. So I think, again, to me, there's the 2 parts that I see of that. I think that's a historic tension, is that the chain comes apart, where to me the solution and the opportunity is when the chain comes together. So it's about communication. I think technology plays a big role in being able to provide the data both forward in the system and backward in the system. But it is about this pathway of continuous improvement, and I think that's how the strategy needs to be framed, is the idea that these are opportunities, they're not challenges, but that you need to create and to continue to create the relationships, the value sharing models, and the communication structures in order that that everyone in the chain is on the same page and everybody's working towards the same vision. So, I think that some fundamentals are in place here already. Perhaps Ireland, through the Origin Green program, has a head start on other places in the world. I think it's potentially more secure here. But when you're a small country like this, you don't have scale on your side. It's really about differentiation. It's not about competing by driving costs down. But that sustainability piece of it, and that includes the sustainability of the family farm. But that definition of what is viability at that level, to me, needs to change. I think we're kind of stuck in the past in terms of how that's defined.
We probably have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Do we have any more questions from the floor? I see somebody in the back here.
Kieran Fitzgerald. I'd just like to ask Mary to maybe think about the contrast between the demand for fresh, for origin, and for what's authenticity that she says is the highlight of the millennial demand, which is driving food demand at the moment, and the notion that free from and synthetic and lab-made is the way of the future, because I don't think the two actually work quite well. And I suppose that's something that I would say is maybe a nuance of a European view of food that doesn't like technology and in fact bans it. because we don't do GM,
Right.
and European view of food
Right.
that is based on authenticity, origin, fresh, etc.
Right. I think that's a very interesting question, and one that she's often used to say, wait a minute, these millennials are not consistent in their behavior. They say they want fresh and healthy, but yet they'll go to McDonald's in the afternoon. In the U.S., let me speak more to the U.S. standpoint on this, because we were at a stage that the pushback, say, on technology in the food system had become quite loud. As you know, we were more strongly very well adopting of GMOs in terms of the production side of it, and there was the noise around that became quite significant. But it's interesting with the kind of the new technologies that are developing, the farm-based technologies in terms of not on the seed side, but things like drones and sensors and data models. That's something that millennials actually think is really cool. That's the world they've grown up in. So I think it's in the U.S. we actually see a shift in the conversation now. So that the big noise that was around GMO and the pushback against science and the environment is down. I think, to me, the focus on the environment, the considerations about the environment, are probably the stronger drivers in that age group. Speaking very broadly, again, and not speaking as Europeans, but the environmental concerns, and if these new products, what we would say is highly processed because you're making meat in a lab, or you're making a plant-based protein in a factory environment, if that actually is, the environmental concerns are more important than, fresh and natural and lovely. I think you can live in both worlds. I don't think it's an either-or situation. I think there will be both.
Okay, I'd like to thank our first speaker for the day, Mary Shelman, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Mary.